Hey, welcome everyone to the Project Mercury Alumni Association interviews. I'm Paul Ellis, one of the alumni board members, and with me today I have Matt Evers. Matt, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hey, thanks, Paul. Matt Evers. I was cohort 12. Uh, Prismatic Unicorns was our team name. Alumni of Project Mercury. One of the few Marines, or at least only active duty Marine I'm tracking that was part of the Project Mercury program. Logistician by trade. Been in the Marine Corps for almost 14 years now, and currently out here in the Pacific.
Awesome. So you mentioned that you were in the Corps and your team was called Prismatic Unicorns. What made you guys come up with that name, and what was some of the memorable moments you had during the jumpstart that made you that still make you think back to that time frame as a unicorn?
Well, I think the opening lesson of Dr. Ethan Eagle was the analogy he used was we were learning how to swim, and we hadn't swam before, and so we're going to be put in an entirely new environment. And I think we embraced that by willing to kind of think big and think a little goofy, a little creative about our team name and embracing that. I think on the prismatic side comes from trying to embrace the framework of Dr. DeGraff on the creative mindset, kind of the four different prisms and the four different personalities, the four different ways of innovating. And so we wanted to have that as the core part of our team. And then I think unicorns was just the natural kind of heavy green blue mindset we had in the team, where we're thinking high, we're thinking startup, we're thinking big, we want to win. And so we're trying to find and create the next unicorn. And I think the two just kind of came together, and it was a little goofy at first, but we embraced it and we ran with it.
No, it's awesome. So and that was the jumpstart. And I know jumpstart was just 1 week. I would say drinking from a fire hose while running uphill. But throughout the rest of the 12 weeks, what aspect of working within Project Mercury really stood out to you? And what was kind of like the aha moment you had throughout the course?
So I really enjoyed Project Mercury because it is a project. You'll find throughout embedded throughout the whole kind of curriculum and this whole process and the whole kind of innovation process is you're living in a paradox. You're doing kind of both sides of something. And Project Mercury, there's a very academic component, where we're learning the knowledge of the field. There actually are tried and true practices. We're discussing, we're receiving lectures, but then there's a heavy practical focus where you've got to build the thing. You've got to go out and talk to people. You've got to actually use the skills that you've been taught. It's a very people business as well, a very proactive research by doing, learning by doing process. And so I really appreciated that with Project Mercury, especially because the work that you're doing, whether it's the final product you're creating or just the conversations that you're having in the journey, you're kind of putting energy out there in the ecosystem, and you are stimulating change, good positive change, and putting good energy out there. And I think that's a beautiful thing that Project Mercury does. I think the most memorable impact for me is putting these skills together that we had. There was a moment in the journey, I think it was about maybe week 4, where we realized we were just running down too many different lanes. We didn't have a focused target, a focused product that we were going to really drive towards and iterate off of. And the feedback we had collected, kind of the market research sense, kind of watching the weather, we realized we did need to pivot. And so I remember we had a late night call and we worked for a few hours on reassessing what we learned, and really then focusing on the project and what we were trying to achieve. And we made a pivot that evening about week 4, really honed in and focused on the project and then iterated off of that. And it really kind of skyrocketed once we made that big pivot. And I think when you look at maybe some of the other cohorts, you can tell they also reach that pivot point where, hey, we've got to adjust. but perhaps did that a little too late. So you're falling back on maybe some easy answers that aren't fully developed, or you're too technology focused. You don't really have a real innovative policy that's going to push things forward, or you don't have all the resources put together to push something together. And me as like a war gamer and a logistician, I guess that's something I appreciate. Where what's that decisive moment where everything then just kind of tips, and then you work and that snowball like is going, and you're taking advantage of that momentum. And I think that's a difficult thing to sense and achieve, but you've got to find that, and a good moment to experience that. And um, you learn just so many skills then to make sense of that and capitalize on it.
No, awesome. So you said you were watching the weather, and about week 4 you changed. So what was y'all's original project during Jumpstart Week, and what did you actually end up? And how far apart were they from the paradigm of what you started with?
Yeah, quite. Yeah, definitely worlds apart, I would say. So our problem set was, how do we increase small team maneuverability in the Pacific? And I think we had a common framework for what a small team was, but it was defining what is this term maneuverability and what does that mean. And when we started out, I think we couldn't achieve concurrence on that. So we actually kind of let a couple projects that were adjacent to each other kind of incubate. And so one was focused heavily on prolonging casualty care. And so it was the Golden Fleece. And it was the idea of being able to sustain and survive, and then provide an opportunity later to move soldiers out of the weapons engagement zone across a long maritime terrain. And so we had this Golden Fleece idea, and then another idea then was focused on kind of the logistics in a contested environment, in a maritime environment, and kind of this Uber idea of using an app that could connect in all these different connectors to distribute things. And you could kind of plan your logistics around that. And both just couldn't really take off, and we didn't really find a powerful use case or the right organizational tools or people to leverage to see if we were actually solving the right problem. But then we pivoted into our end product, which was called EchoLink, and it's a kind of a paradox also kind of product where I guess kind of the closest technology tactical analogy is Ukraine with the distributed kind of microphones and sensors they have all throughout the battlefield. We had this idea of mobile device enabled sensors, predominantly using acoustics, but you could use all the other kind of sensors available in the cell phone, and using that in aggregate to get a better sense of early air indications and warnings, kind of counter UAS stuff as well at a smaller tactical level, leveraging acoustic signals and sending kind of heartbeat data between cell phones. So this idea of you got this proliferation of sensors across the battlefield that could actually make sense of some things that may be unseen and help contribute to a common tactical picture. So our maneuverability concept then transitioned into the ability to sense and make sense and command and control. And our product was EchoLink, which I think ended up kind of moving on a little bit with the Air Force Software Factory, and a little bit, I think, with the Singapore Air Force. And they were kind of experimenting with our front end innovation idea.
No, that's kind of awesome that you went from life sustainment mobility to prepare for any type of command and control that's coming your way. So that is a wide berth that you guys start off and where you ended up with. So after Project Mercury, what have you done utilizing Project Mercury training, the courses, the knowledge within your realm of control as a Marine and a logistician?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I think, I guess to frame it, the thing I like with Project Mercury, it's got these layers, right? It gives you tools for individuals and the team and the organization you're with and the organization and the organization. And so for me, since graduating Project Mercury, I shifted to a very red-blue organization. So I came out here to the Pacific, pre-MEF, very focused, on competition and the pacing threat out here, focused on the here and now, but also with an eye a little bit to the near future on how we're going to campaign. So a very red-blue organization. And so that said, those kind of organizations aren't necessarily right for some of our traditional views of innovation, right? The big unicorns or the big tech kind of stuff, the very future forward looking things. There are different organizations like yellow-green organizations that really focus on that. But that said, I still use the innovation skills and the creative mindset framework. I use it in the way I interact with people. So I'm in an organization that's got a very wide span of control and a very wide customer base, and that's very focused on this idea of command and control. So ironically, I moved into an organization that does that. And command and control isn't just a technology thing. There's all these different components into it, and I think those fit neatly into the kind of four different lenses of the innovation mindset, the four different colors. So I use that in the way I problem solve day to day, in the way I work with teams. I try to keep that kind of framework, that kind of mindset. The skills that you learn in like how to win a bar fight, so how to gain buy-in, how to work with people, using that with working with the staff and how we're trying to solve these problems and advance the campaign plan along. So even in a heavy red-blue organization, right, we're not coming up with the next big policy change or organizational change, but we're using those things to campaign and to incorporate into exercises that are trying to achieve an effect. And I think that's a very good red-blue military sense of innovation. The side project that I kind of do, the other world that I think is adjacent to the innovation skills in Project Mercury is wargaming. Wargaming has this amalgamation of like facilitation skills and creative thinking and all these other kinds of things. And so that's my kind of like foot in the door of kind of the yellow-green kind of side. And so I've worked with some folks out here and making bespoke educational games for them to help facilitate group dynamics, doing small unit level professional military education, and then working with Marine Corps University and participating in their competitive wargaming tournaments. And recently, this past year, I finished competing in the Commandant's wargaming tournament. And the good thing with that is it created a lot of press to help create this movement, create additional momentum in getting wargaming into the institution. So, all that to say, like the concepts with Project Mercury, I think kind of are embedded into the habits and the way I think now, and those are very powerful things, even though you're not necessarily creating what we may think are like innovation, unicorns, that we think might be out there in DoD or.
No, perfect. So you mentioned that wargaming, winning being involved in the Commandant Challenge, and being in a kind of a blue-red organization. As you traversed and working in both those different mindsets, because those are kind of like different hemispheres of your brain utilization there, what type of like failure cake did you have to end up going through to actually modify that and actually make it successful? Because as we all know, nothing survives first contact. So can you describe a time where as you were doing this bar fight that you met and had to eat some, I wouldn't say humble pie, but more like a failure cake from this process?
Yeah, that's fair. So I think what I experienced, when I first arrived out here, and then especially my role in the organization, where I'm an operations officer in a tactical unit, and especially in a support unit, is for me, right? I live in this paradox. which is a very tough thing to keep in your brain. So an example in the Red Blue organization is we think about war, we prepare for war, and we're living like we're going to war every single day. But I live in paradise, right? This is people go vacation here, 5-star resorts. People's families are out here. I go home every day. I've got a car, right? This isn't the global war on terrorism. And so living in that paradox, that is a hard thing to impress upon the team that you're working with, especially if they don't have the same experience as you. And most people, like you mentioned, those it's very difficult to kind of work those two different parts of your brain. Most people, they've got to be comfortable. You got to just just live with one side of the brain or the other, you know. And so day to day, it's easier to kind of live in the well, I live in paradise, kind of the Garrison mindset. And so everything else that's happening around you, kind of the operational tempo, or why are we doing certain things, or why are we so fixated on certain details and whatnot? Those things can become overwhelming because you're missing the other side of the brain where you're misunderstanding the why, or you just don't have the perspective on the why. And so that's a challenge that even for myself to, you got to keep that motivation and keep those two things in your head, because you got to balance them, because you can't run yourself into the ground. You can't run your team into the ground. And so I do use the staff to have that back and forth where we can just like with Jeff DeGraff, we can use that constructive conflict to come up with better ways of progressing, right? Because to the point of running ourselves in the ground, we've got to sustainably campaign. We've got to sustainably execute all these exercises across the board, because cumulatively, we think that's going to create some kind of effect that we're trying to achieve. And so, there is, I'm not going to say balance, but there's a certain harmony that needs to be created in those tensions. And being you know this, Ellis, from being out here in the Pacific as well, is kind of living in that paradox and embracing that cognitive dissonance.
No, you're 100% accurate. I mean, you said it perfectly that, living in the Hawaii of Japan, as you said, the 5-star resorts, and having to balance that with preparing for like constant conflict and prepare for battle, third MEF, no matter what organization you are within there, it's kind of hard to think about that when you can go to Family Mart, Lawson's,
Yeah.
the sushi. You get to go enjoy all these different things right there. Go to 5-star resorts that people from mainland come down to Okinawa. My question for you though is you mentioned something that was interesting. You talk about the harmony and the balance. As you look back on your time within your cohort and
Yeah.
flashing forward to now, what do you see as been like the legacy of Project Mercury, the course you went through, and have you been in contact and interaction with other PM alumni out there, and what kind of like reflection do you have from all those individuals?
Yeah. So I think one aspect with harmony balance is, people talk about work-life balance, and that's one thing that happens with the alumni, right? We're invested. We're this very close team, and then the nature of what comes next or what we have in our life, may uh, may create some challenges or distance from the team that we had. That said, I still do think we still maintain connection, not just within our cohort, but with other alumni as well within Project Mercury. And from what I've seen, just connecting at some of these good reunion opportunities, like the Air Force Association, like the big conference. Was able to get down there last year because the opportunity lined up, and that was a good thing to meet with other cohort members. And I got to meet with Matt again, from the other Matt from our team, and that was a really powerful thing to reconnect. And the products that Innovatrium and Project Mercury has put out like the On Orbit annual newsletter. I think those are great tools to kind of reconnect and see what people are doing. Basecamp has been good. Every once in a while I go back in there and I see what's happening and what's in the chat and what new products are being developed and who's working on what. And so that's a good pulse check using that. The Signal chat as well, seeing what people have been doing and not letting go of the fire. Like I know there's been challenges with the resourcing for Project Mercury, where I was fortunate where this pipeline was basically created with Air Force University, and I was in a sister university, and so I got to leverage that joint opportunity. But that's a challenge when you got to fight for resources from other organizations to create these kind of ad hoc um, workshops and cohorts and whatnot, and that can be a good thing because then you've got a focused team and very focused problem sets, but that can also be a bad thing because then you don't have a consistent pipeline or you're not bringing in as a diverse team set to create that bow wave of onward innovation after the project, which is kind of the purpose, of the Alumni Association and reconnecting the alumni. So I think that one, the pipeline is very important, the kind of the Air University model before, I think that's very important. But the other ways that we've maintained a sense of connection, all those other things I mentioned, and seeing some of the things people are doing, like creating their own kind of communities. Like I've seen that in the Space Force and some other entities, kind of pushing that forward. So it's a very active group that's always trying to kind of push the next thing and create community. And I think that's the powerful thing with Project Mercury and the alumni is that we're also able to connect these other organizations and just keep that kind of the movement going. And Project Mercury, I think, best equips you, in my opinion. There's other things out there, but I think Project Mercury best equips you to kind of put all those skills together in kind of one package and then turn those into habits and mindset that are just really powerful no matter where you go.
No, that's awesome. So I appreciate you giving time to talk about your experience on Project Mercury. I think there's one thing that you point out that I think is really insightful to point out is that we're in a sister service and Project Mercury came from Air University, but we work together to get after it. And it just shows the diversity of how we look at things, and that an innovator is an innovator no matter what uniform you wear, be it the OCP, the camis, all the way to civilian attire, that we're one team, one fight getting after things. So I really appreciate you coming on and sharing everything you've done, ranging from Golden Fleece, EchoLink, to kicking butt at the wargaming, for the Commandant. What would you say to an innovator, or if you were able to talk to another Matt down the road, who was talking about being part of innovation and was second guessing themselves, what would you tell that type of innovator to go do?
Well, I think one is try to gain perspective, and then two is always keep learning and keep connecting. On the perspective, I think a lot of innovators get frustrated because they think there's kind of like this arbitrary ceiling or arbitrary handcuffs being put on them, or why is this person being an immovable object, And well, really anyone can be an innovator, and there's different types of innovation, and I think a lot of it comes from perspective on where are people at and what are they trying to do and what do they value and where are they in the organization, what does the organization value. And so I think a lot of people get defeated with the not having the perspective, or not being willing to kind of garner the other perspectives to come to and embrace the conflict and come up with something constructive, kind of moving forward. It's back to that how to win a bar fight kind of model. So that's the first thing, especially for military members who I think some of them just get out too early, in my opinion. I think there's innovators that got to stay, that got to become the future staff and CO non-commissioned officers, the future senior enlisted leaders, the future officers, they got to stay in. You can't learn this stuff. You just become too dogmatic later. So learn this while you're young, stay in. And then they're always learning, always connecting. So you mentioned the Air Force and the Marine Corps. I think you gotta cast a wide net. You gotta you gotta go seek out the experts. You gotta find people that are smarter than you in certain areas, or that are domain experts. And this comes back to Project Mercury's kind of two call rule. And then you got to keep that Rolodex as big as you can, and trying to maximize the effectiveness of when you're going to use that two call rule is actually going to be effective. And that's paid dividends, especially out here in Okinawa, where we're all fighting together. And at first we don't know all each other, but we realize how powerful things are when we connect different organizations, especially Air Force and the Marine Corps out here in Okinawa. And so yeah, I think those are the two things: is in simple Project Mercury terms, how to win a bar fight, and the two call rule. I think those are the two big skills that I think you got to learn quickly, and that will go a long way for you.
No, that's awesome, Matt. I appreciate it once again. Thank you for giving your time and for the interview. And I know the time difference is there, so I greatly understand. And enjoy your time in Okinawa and have fun there. So thanks again. Any closing remarks that you want to leave before we end this talk?
No, all good, Paul. Yeah, thanks for letting me talk and kind of run my suck. I appreciate it, and I'm glad to still be connected with the community, and appreciate all the hard effort that you're doing. Yeah, wish the best to the team, and looking forward to seeing this thing grow with alumni efforts, and with the pipeline that we have.